Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Friday, June 25th in the year 2021. And no matter if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast or if you're watching us on YouTube, I want to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes a part of your day. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at JStevens07. You can also follow the podcast on Twitter as well at Locked On Buckeye. Lined up for today, if you're watching us on YouTube, you see the guest next to me. It is Alex Gilstrap, an NFL draft analyst. He is on a part of the trio that is the NFL Draft Prospect Podcast from the Believe Podcast Network. But before we get to all that, I want to remind you to make sure you check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast because it's the place for you to join Locked On NFL Draft host Trevor Sakema and Benjamin Solak for recaps and analysis of the 2021 NFL Draft and a look ahead at next year's future first-round picks. Follow the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your fine podcasts. Alex Gilstrap, I told myself a while ago that I was going to try to stick with Ryan Roberts for draft analyst and for things that come from the podcast. But I knew at some point you would come on this podcast or another podcast that I host. Today is the day. A little Garrett Wilson, a little Chris Olave, and Jeremy Ruckert talk as well. A long intro. Alex, you're here. How you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing good. It's good company to be in with Ryan to be a part of this show, so I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, no problem at all. I got to catch, like I told you off air, the tight end show. Going to hit that at the end. Got to catch the entirety of the wide receiver position. I actually asked you a question on Twitter, which kind of sparked me like, wait, let me get Alex on the show in regards to the Olave-Wilson conversation. Many people were excited that Olave came back. I'm excited Olave came back for the possibility of what this offense can be with him on one side, Wilson on another, Jackson Smith and Jigba right there in the slot position. Let's start with Chris Olave, the older gentleman, the guy that some think will be a first-round draft pick in this upcoming NFL draft. I've heard people in NFL circles say that even today. You, from what you see on the film and watching Olave play the football, what do you see?
For me, Olave is a good football player. Just simply put, there's nothing about him that screams exciting traits to you because when you're watching the film and you're trying to project these guys to the next level, you got to find what they do that's going to have them win at the next level. So for Chris Olave, how he wins now in college and how you are going to have to project him is he does a very, very good job finding soft spots in coverage. Simply, he's very smart. He's a nuanced route runner. People talk about this all the time, just how smooth he is, good hands, ability to catch at the catch point. And then he's just very smart and nuanced in his movements throughout the route stem, and he runs a very vast route tree. So Chris Olave is someone that he doesn't wow you athletically. He doesn't wow you with his size. He doesn't wow you with his play strength, and that's probably his biggest negative is probably his slim demeanor, his slim play style, and his slim frame. So, but Chris Olave is someone that he is exciting. There's things to like, and there's things to covet as an NFL wide receiver. And I simply put it this way to you. I was like, I love Chris Olave as a wide receiver 2 at the next level. I think that's just the perfect role for him. He's someone that I just don't see that it factor about him as it is right now that would warrant him being the main target getter in an NFL offense, especially early on. I think if you're trying to project him to the next level and you're trying to say best case scenario, Keenan Allen is someone slim frame, good route runner, not going to wow you with his speed or athleticism. And that's a great ceiling. That's a wide receiver 1, obviously. But I just see a little bit less juice athletically. I think you talk about him as a route runner, and that's what he's highly coveted as is for his route running. I think more so than his crisp breaks and his, acceleration in and out of breaks. I think it's more just him understanding leverage and understanding how to get on the right side of the play to where he can create that 1 to 2 yards needed, especially when Justin Fields, who this past year was probably the most accurate quarterback in college football from a consistency standpoint, it made it easier on Justin Fields. So I think that's why Chris Olave has had so much success in that Ohio State offense. So I don't see him possessing those wide receiver one in the NFL traits physically that you see in guys of late. You have A.J. Brown, who's developed into a wide receiver one, who his amazing yak ability, yard after catch, he's practically a running back with the ball in his hands. You have DK Metcalf, and his athleticism and his size speaks for itself. You have these younger guys that are coming out, Jerry Jeudy with his route running, but I think him more so than Chris Olave is a testament to his route running based on his acceleration and his timing and his foot quickness, his foot cadence. So Chris Olave just lacks a little bit of juice athletically for me to really project him as a first rounder right now. But I am excited for what he can be, especially early on, because he just understands the game of football so well.
You mentioned his slim body, his frame being slender. Part of the reason he wanted to come back, and I believe he stated this in January when he made the announcement, he wanted to come back. He was going to come back to play at Ohio State this year. He said he wanted to get stronger, get a more solid pro-ready body, and he didn't believe he was there last year. How do you think him getting stronger will affect his projection, or let's say his play in the fall, him getting more time in the weight room, working with his core, upper body, lower body strength? How do you think that will help him in the fall, and then using that to project him into next year's draft?
Yeah, I think it helps. I mean, play strength at the wide receiver position helps in a couple ways. One is just simply getting off the line of scrimmage. In the Big Ten, he doesn't face too much press coverage relative to what he's going to see at the next level. And having the ability to swipe guys' hands off of you, you just have to be simply stronger than the guy across from you. It doesn't matter if you're in the trenches where you see it most or you're on the outside at wide receiver and corner. Being stronger than the guy across from you is just super important. And at the next level, if he did go into the draft this year, he would have walked in and been one of the weaker wide receivers, especially on the outside in the NFL. So getting stronger helps in that point. And I think one way that for his play style could help him take that next step and become even more of a threat is his ability to stretch the field vertically, because I said he doesn't have too much juice in and out of breaks and acceleration and change of pace, but he has pretty good long speed. I think when he really striding out and he's running a go route, he has some pretty good long speed, even better than Garrett Wilson, who I know we're going to touch on here in a second. So, his ability to stretch the field vertically is going to be huge for him. And one part of stretching the field vertically is the ability to go up and get the ball through contact. Guys in the NFL, they're going to be a little bit more sticky than what you see at college for what he's currently facing, the talent that Chris Olave is, and his ability to go up and get it, fight through arm battles, throughout the route stem is going to be huge for him. So play strength, it comes into effect a couple ways. And then, of course, his yak ability, which I think is, play strength. That's the one part where you see it the most with Chris Olave specifically is after the catch. He's just to get it and get down. He's not going to do too much after the catch because once that first defender gets there, he's typically down.
Garrett Wilson, Olave, amazing talent. Garrett Wilson, many people probably heard about who he was during the 2019 season, but they may not have known exactly who the other guy on the other side of the field was, or I think at the time he may have been the slot, on the outside, I believe, freshman year. But then he had that catch in the Clemson game, first drive of the game. I'm like, bro, you got a 42, 44-inch vert. Like, you're getting – and I understand, like, you're getting propelled by the defender, so you're looking like you're jumping higher than what you're actually doing. Absolutely. But that's amazing. But the prospect to me of Wilson being a wide receiver one in the NFL, I think there's more likelihood of that than Olave. I think the frame is part of the reason why that is the case. But what do you see, Alex, when you watch Wilson and you see his tape from the past couple of years?
Yeah, you talk about wide receiver talent that's come out of college football into the NFL the last couple of years. Obviously, it's one of the most talked about positions because of the depth. And for me, like for you to warrant a first-round consideration, in my opinion, you have to have something about you. Like I said, Chris Olave lacks, and that's why I see him more as a day two kind of player, a second-round pick. Garrett Wilson possesses that elite trait that you need, and it's his foot cadence, it's his foot quickness, and his route running. He has some special plays on film with his ability to separate in the first level, second level. Inside and out versatility is huge for Garrett Wilson. Like you said, playing the slot a lot freshman year, more on the outside this sophomore year in 2020. So Garrett Wilson can play inside and out, which I think is going to even help him even more going forward. Playing in the slot, obviously you don't have to face presses often. I know he's a little smaller from a height perspective than Chris Olave. So a lot of teams may see him more as a slot, not having to face press coverage quite as often. His route running will really, really show off in off-man coverage where he gets people on their heels. He attacks their center of body, and then he can just bounce, and he's just bouncy and accelerates. So Garrett Wilson does have a special trait. Like I said, very eerily similar. I mentioned Jerry Jeudy earlier in the show, very similar to Jerry Jeudy with his ability to just bounce out of his breaks and really extend before the other guy can get his foot in the ground. The defender can get his foot in the ground. So Wilson, talk about his ability at the catch point. The Clemson highlight in 2019, 2020 was a testament to that. This guy can go up and get the football. I don't see too many. I know he had one game where he had a little bit of a problem with drops. I can't remember what game that was in 2020 that I was watching, but I don't think it's a huge issue, not to the degree that Jerry Jeudy was. And Jerry Jeudy was looked at as a consensus first-round prospect. So I see a lot of similarities in their game as far as their athleticism, their frame, their size, their ability to separate. And I think Garrett Wilson has better ball skills. So I just think overall you're getting a very, very good football player that can do a lot of things and be a weapon in a lot of different ways for an NFL offense in year one.
What weakness do you see in Garrett Wilson when you watch the film?
Yeah, he doesn't have quite the play strength concerns Chris Olave does, but he's not going to run after the catch. He's too much unless he's in space. But in traffic, over the middle of the field, he's not going to break too many tackles. But when he has defenders, in the open space, they're not touching him. So for weaknesses, I'd say it's probably contact balance, which not a lot of wide receivers really have. So his weaknesses really aren't that highly coveted. And I think height is going to, for some people, is going to be a detriment. He's 5'10". He's not a 6 foot plus guy, but there's plenty of 5'10" and below wide receivers that have success, especially when they have his caliber of athleticism. Honestly, there's not too many holes to pick in his game, and that's why I love Garrett Wilson so much. He's such a good football player, and this wide receiver class is a little down at the top than in these last couple of years that we've seen, but I think Garrett Wilson and there's, Traylon Burks from Arkansas, they're really holding this class up, in my opinion. Very two different styles of football players, but Garrett Wilson doesn't have too many holes to pick in his game, honestly.
It's the summertime, and a lot of people will refresh their memory, Alex, by what they see from the stat sheet from last year, the end-of-season stats. So there may be a listener or two that's trying to get into the swing of things for football season, and the way they're reminding themselves of that is going back and looking at the stat sheet. Olave had 50 catches. Wilson had 43. Olave had 729 receiving yards. Wilson had 723. Olave 7 touchdowns. Wilson 6 touchdowns. Now the average per reception, Olave 14.6. Wilson 16.8. So there may be people that may look at that and say, well, Alex, I think Olave is the better prospect. You said wide receiver 2 based off of wide receiver 1 for Wilson. Well, the stat sheet, the numbers tell me that Olave is a better prospect than Wilson. I saw what you said on Twitter. I don't know if people listening saw what you said, but if you could explain who is the better pro prospect. I think you kind of already said that, but reiterate it once again, and then kind of give reasons why the stat sheet doesn't say everything about these two, people in general, but these two specific players.
Yeah, for me, like I kind of alluded to already, Garrett Wilson, to me, is the better NFL prospect. And like you said, the production, especially in 2020, was eerily similar. There's, if anything, Chris Olave has an edge, but I talked about it. It's about having traits. At the end of the day, you can put up the stats, and I can look at stats and say, man, this guy is productive. But at the end of the day, if you're going to compete at the highest level of sport in the world, I think is the NFL. I think like separating from the amateur level and separating from the collegiate level, there's the biggest gap in football for transition from college to NFL. You're going to get to that level. You have to have something you can hang your hat on to where the team can scheme you open can get you the ball in your hands. And for me, I think Garrett Wilson is going to be a huge threat in the NFL simply because of his athleticism, his foot cadence, his ability to manipulate defenders left and right before making his break and not being able to show it. He doesn't show where he's going until the last second. It's too late for defenders. Chris Olave does a great job of understanding what's, what side to release on and how to get leverage and how to find open spaces and how to sit in zone coverages, find holes in zone coverage, which is all beneficial to an NFL team. Don't get me wrong. But when I'm projecting someone to be a wide receiver one, it's someone that, and that's what I think of when I'm thinking of a first round caliber wide receiver, someone that I can see being the main target getter in an NFL offense. Garrett Wilson's going to make life easy on the quarterback. Chris Olave makes life easy on the quarterback, but Garrett Wilson is, you talk about Chris Olave finding holes in defense. Garrett Wilson's going to create holes in the defense. That's the difference for me between Olave being a wide receiver 2 in the NFL and a second round prospect, in my opinion, and Garrett Wilson being a number 1 guy at the next level.
Jeremy Ruckert, a tight end, and I was not planning on doing this when I first reached out to you, but then I realized by talking to Ryan, then the podcast episode came out, you guys had hit on tight ends on the podcast. Jeremy Ruckert production, Ohio State tight ends aren't known for their production, so you look at the 13 catches that Ruckert had, the second leading reception individual, third receptions for Ohio State last year, 151 and through the air and 5 touchdowns. You're thinking, those 13 receptions, it's okay, but I don't know the pro prospect that Ruckert is. Some Ohio State fans may be thinking that, saying we don't utilize the tight end. Maybe Ryan Day utilizes more pro schemes and pro concepts and utilizes the tight end more this year, but we're just not sure what to think about Ruckert. I think Ruckert is highly underutilized. I think he's a great asset in the passing game. Blocking, okay, it is what it is. But I think his catching ability is something that should be utilized more. What do you see? How do you think he stacks up with this year's tight end class?
Yeah, for me, I have him as a top 5 tight end as it currently stands. And I think this year's tight end class, from a whole perspective, obviously Kyle Pitts is a phenomenal talent, one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen, if not the best. But for taking apart the whole class, I think this 2022 class has a chance to be one of the best that I've seen in my years of doing this. So having Jeremy Ruckert in the top 5 is really, really impressive. And like you said, he wasn't utilized nearly as much as he should have given the talent. I think he's a solid pass blocker, or a solid run blocker, should I say. I don't think he wows you physically with that, but I think as an underutilized tight end pass catching weapon, you saw it in the playoff as they started to find him in the Clemson game, the 2 touchdowns. He catches the ball through contact. He has great hands. You've seen the one-handed catches he's able to put on tape. And I think he runs good routes. I think overall you're getting a good athlete. I think he's a plus athlete. Obviously, again, not to the standard of Kyle Pitts, but that's a special talent. But he's a plus athlete that can stretch the field vertically for you at the tight end position and be a seam stretcher that is not a liability in the run game. So I think you just check a lot of boxes, and that's one of the keys to scouting and evaluating this talent is checking boxes. What can you do and what can't you do? That's simply as it is. Like, people try to put grades on it and say, 1 through 5, what do you say he is? It's not about that. It's about how many boxes can you check, and simply put, Jeremy Ruckert checks a lot of boxes as a tight end prospect.
You said what can you do versus what can't you do? What can't he do now that you think during the season we might see glimpses of things he can't do now that he might be able to do during the football season?
I mean, obviously, one thing that we're going to want to see is you saw him come on towards the end of the season, like I alluded to there a second ago. We want to see him become a focal point in the offense, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do at Ohio State when you have Garrett Wilson, you have Chris Olave, you have Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's supposed to be a breakout candidate. I know Bruce Feldman talked about him quite a bit in his latest athletic article. So you have all these weapons, so it's hard to do that at Ohio State, and that's just a testament to the talent that the Buckeyes have. But you want to see some production. That's just simply – production is not everything. We talked about the wide receivers and the differences. Production is not everything. You have to check box. You have to show traits. But at the end of the day, you want to see more than 13 receptions in a season. And I know it's a shortened season and everything else, but you got to see a little bit more of that. But on the field, I want to see a little bit more of a bully in the run game as a blocker, because I think that will separate him from being just a depth piece at tight end at the next level, a tight end 2, worst case scenario, I think a tight end 3 to being a solid tight end 1, someone that you can rely on play in and play out to one block and then be that threat down the football field that he has shown in glimpses that he can be.
Alex, this has been fun, man. A lot of fun. Do you have any last comments or words you want to make about any of these 3 prospects before we close this show?
I just got to say, Ohio State's got some good ones. You lose Justin, simply put, you lose Justin Fields, who was my quarterback 2 in this year's class. CJ Stroud, I'm excited about moving forward. I think he's an extreme talent. I know I watched him in some Elite 11 coverage that he was in a couple years ago coming out of high school. And then you return Chris Olave, which I thought was crazy good for Ohio State and their projection moving forward. There's a lot to like on the offensive side of the football, and then that defensive line is just going to hold it up. Ohio State, again, is going to be one of those teams that you look out for moving forward to being a college football playoff and a college football playoff champion contender.
Absolutely. Alex, if you could let everybody know where they can connect with you on Twitter, social media, then also where they can listen to the podcast, anything else you're doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can follow me on Twitter at Alex Gilstrap. I'm always down to comment back and forth, talking some ball, talking, anything from draft prospects to just NFL football in general. So, the NBA playoffs are now. We can talk about NBA playoffs if you want to. So you can follow me there. I do some work on Sports Illustrated through the NFL Draft Bible, doing scouting reports through there. So check out their production, their publication every year. And then the podcast, that's my bread and butter. I love the podcast. I love talking, getting on here and talk ball. So you can follow us wherever you get your Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at NFL Prospects Pod.
This has been a fun time. Alex Gilstrap. We'll definitely have you on probably sooner than later, because there's a lot of things you guys are talking about on the podcast we'll want to talk about here on this podcast as well. You guys can always follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. This is Friday. It's my birthday. I have no idea what I have planned today, but I'm sure to find something enjoyable to do on Friday, June 25th, to have an enjoyable weekend, guys. We'll be back next Monday talking more Ohio State football, maybe basketball too.